Hello, everybody, and welcome to this podcast presentation. My name is Raúl Montes Vázquez, and today we are going to be talking about a very interesting and important issue that took place in the 20th century. So, let's go over there. The Cold War started in 1947. This is something that occurs after the Second World War between the United States and the Soviet Union. Let's all remember that the Soviet Union and Americans were allies during the Second World War against the Axis, especially the Nazis. But the tension between these two nations between 1944 and 1945 were increasing. It was not until 1947 that their differences were so deep that the world gets divided into two, the communism and the capitalism. The capitalism was led by the United States. The communism was led by the Soviet Union. Of course, that during this period, very important situations occur, like the ones that I'm going to mention now. For example, in 47, the Marshall Plan was created. The North Atlantic Trade Organization was formed. The Korean War started. The Berlin Wall was built. The Bay of Pigs invasion by the Americans on Cuba. Talking about Cuba, we have the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. I think that also we can get in here the assassination of President Kennedy. Uh, in 65, Americans sent their very first troops to Vietnam. The space race, we all know that Americans and Soviets were so competitive for putting their people in the space uh, before the other nation. We also have the Neil Armstrong, who was the very first man on the moon. Uh, we have the Soviet invasion on Afghanistan. We have the resignation of President Nixon, and we have the Soviet troops leaving Afghanistan. And we have what I think is the most important and remember situation of the Cold War, which was the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. It was almost 30 years that wall was on Berlin, divided Germany and divided the world. And when the Berlin Wall falls down on the day of November the 9th, 1989, it was so clear that the Cold War was getting to an end. And it was, because in 1991, the new nation called Russia officially recognized that the Soviet Union was no longer more in existence. So those are like the most important periods, the most important events that occurred during the Cold War. This is an interesting question because it's true. Uh, why does the Cold War was called this way? And the answer is simple. Because neither the United States had attacked directly the Soviet Union, or the Soviet Union never attacked directly the United States. One of the main reasons that created a conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union was the difference of ideologies. Americans wanted the capitalism, meanwhile the Soviets wanted the socialism. And I'm going to tell you some of the differences each ideology has in order we can understand how they work. Alright, so I'm going to give you one advantage and one disadvantage of each system in order we can understand quickly these ideologies. I'm going to start first with capitalism. One of the advantages of this ideology and this system is a free trade, something that we as Mexicans were able to see when the North American Free Trade Agreement, the NAFTA, or what we call here the TLC, el Tratado de Libre Comercio, entering functions in 1994. We, as citizens of one of the nations involved in this trade agreement, had the opportunity to acquire products and services that we did not have, and also we can get these products. These products became more cheaper than in other parts of the world. But one of its disadvantages, and I dare to say that it is the most notable, it is the inequality in question of the distribution of basic services to citizens, and this happens in most of the countries with this model. We have to say it, and this is not a surprise. Mexico is one of the nations that unfortunately has a high number of poor people, but also America, the United States, has uh, has a great and important number of people in poorness. And well, what can I say about our brothers and sisters in Latin America? Well, in South America. So I think that mm, I there are things that uh, benefit us as citizens, but there are things that affect us, and there are people that get more affected of this than others. So I think that that's one of the main points of this ideology and model. The same as we did with capitalism, now we are going to do with socialism, with one advantage and one disadvantage of this ideology and model. So, one advantage of socialism is that this seeks the general interest, the interest of the people, and therefore the collective welfare, which I think is it can be good, because if the people can get all what they need to have a good life, it's perfect. But unfortunately, in most of the cases, that's not completely true. And I'm going to tell you that in a couple of seconds. Uh, One of the disadvantages of the socialism is that the economy can be in deep growth problems, which can lead that nation into an economic crisis, and not only economic, also a humanitarian crisis. One of the most recognized cases is the case of Cuba. We have to remember that Cuba has been living in a socialist government since 1959 with Fidel Castro. After Fidel Castro, his brother and mi tocayo, and Raúl Castro, and now President Diaz-Canel. So it's kind of interesting that now in 2021 the Cuban people is officially tired of this system. We can see it in their streets. We can see it in how their uh, economic bases are worldwide, and we can see really how bad this system has been for the Cuban people. And all of what happens some months ago is the very great example of how a socialist government can be, and how the people can be tired and can officially say we don't want this system anymore because it doesn't work. That's that's official, and I can confirm it. That system does not work. But everyone is free to have their own perspectives and their own opinions. Well, I am very fortunate to have my grandparents alive. In this case, I have the honor to talk with my grandmother about the Cold War because she lived all of the Cold War, and I asked her some questions about the topic. She's a bit shy, I have to admit it. She's a bit shy with this technology, with the technology. So I decided that I just ask her personally, and she writes me her responses. So in the next slide, you're going to see the question and the answer of my dear grandma. So now, ladies and gentlemen, for ending this podcast presentation, I want to tell you my final conclusions about the Cold War. Um, I think that the Cold War was a clear example of how ideologies can divide the world. I think that um, in the world we live today is the legacy of what happened during the years of the Cold War. We saw how, for many years, people have to live worried if one day or another the Russians, well, the Soviets, not Russians, or the Americans can launch a bomb. And, well, talking about the bombs, I want to just give you some facts, a quick fact. Yesterday I was checking history uh, on Instagram, and I saw a very interesting post of this page, which says that in 1961, President Kennedy recommends American families to build some nuclear protection spaces in order they can be safe. In the remote case, the Soviets can launch a bomb against the United States. So it's kind of interesting to see how the people, not just of those two nations of the world, live with the idea that they need to have a bunker, nuclear bunker, because they didn't know if they can launch a bomb. We saw that they never launch a bomb, but there were some conflicts in other parts of the world that were occasioned because of the Cold War. And about the economic systems, I think that each one has their good and their bad things. Now, most of the countries of the world live in the capitalism. There are some few, very few nations that live with socialism. And personally, I think that those nations of socialist governments and socialist economics and policies are the ones that have suffered the most. But we as capitalist nation also have have lived very tough moments. So I think that each system has their own good and bad things, but let's just hope that we can continue to live in a peaceful, well, in a world that does not include nuclear bombs. And let's just hope that our leaders can remember what they lived during the years of the Cold War and think, does it really need to happen again? Or we can just simply live as one nation under God. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy this and see you soon. Bye bye.